Hello and welcome to the very special broadcast of the India Foundation. I am Abhijit Majumdar, and today we have with us the man on the front line of this war against perhaps the worst pandemic of our living memory. We have Mr. Hardeep Puri, the Civil Aviation Minister and also the Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs. He is also one of India's finest diplomats, and he has been the permanent representative of India at the United Nations as well as the President of the United Nations Security Council. Welcome, Mr. Puri. This is the worst of times for everything, but also for aviation. India has been severely hit. As the aviation minister, what are the three biggest tasks for you?
This challenge we are facing today is extremely difficult. It is unprecedented, and certainly I cannot recall in my professional life. I spent 40 years in another profession, and now I don't recall any period when economic activity, and I'm using the term in a broad, comprehensive way, was completely locked down for an extended period of time. I think that poses a challenge, but I am confident that we have the means, we have the political will, we have the economic stamina to meet the challenge and come out of it strong. Whether it is the worst, I don't know, because I am also very cautious. There are countries which are beginning to show some signs of a second wave. I know of countries which opened up and then went in. I'm confident that we will, because of the timely, effective and comprehensive action taken by the Prime Minister in the lockdown, we have been able to contain the numbers. A lot of people will argue with you that, numbers are growing. Look, let's be realistic. If you have a population base of 135 crores, you have a mortality rate only of 2.85 or 2.9%. Even if you got 330,000, 3.3 lakh cases, where the recovery rate is over 50%, frankly, we are suffering more on account of the paranoia created by the virus and its contagion effect rather than the damage. And there is some kind of administrative action which has to go on. I'm talking about Maharashtra and Delhi. We lose normally 8,500 people a day on account of road accidents. Okay? If I give you the figure on communicable diseases or non-communicable diseases, the kind of mortality you are getting on account of COVID is not particularly high. In fact, SARS had a mortality rate of 16 or 17%. SARS. We never had this kind of paranoia on SARS. Ebola. I think the last real devastation which was caused was the Spanish flu. You have figures of 19, 20 million people, millions of people in India dying. But that was what? 1918. Okay? Today you are in 2020. I think it's an unprecedented situation. It is a challenge. But I'm equally confident that with the measures that we are taking, we're going to come out of it. Now, on civil aviation, what are the challenges? First of all, there is civil aviation as a critical driver of economic growth. We have a very low penetration rate, and yet we've had double-digit growth. We've had airlines ceasing operations. I'm talking about one particular airline which ceased operations between December 2018 and April 2019. We had less than 600 planes in the air then, 570 or so. Today we have more than 650 or nearly 700 planes who are capable of flying. They're not in the air because, aviation hasn't resumed fully. So the first challenge was, when we went into lockdown, was the essential services, medical supplies, getting those around. I think Lifeline Udan achieved that purpose. That is the first. And we transported something like 1,000 tons of, reagents, PPE masks, other ventilators, medical supplies. We brought in about 1,500 tons of medical supplies from outside. We sent 30 tons of medical supplies from India to other countries. That's the background. The first challenge after that was domestic civil aviation. We got it started. It wasn't easy. And as I have discovered, anything that you do in the world of COVID, your intentions could be good, you have the best possible arrangement, there will be some downside. So when we started domestic civil aviation, rather we wanted to start domestic civil aviation, we had a lot of people saying it's going to pose a very big risk in terms of spread of numbers. We kept arguing, not because we wanted to resume civil aviation. We argued on the basis of advice from the medical fraternity. The risk is in everything. But when you take a decision on domestic civil aviation, you have to evaluate the risk in terms of other modes of transport. And you have to evaluate it in terms of bicycle, personal car, bus, local train, metro, and normal trains. Now, you don't compare an aeroplane with your personal transport. You compare it with traveling by bus, traveling by rail. And I think no matter which way you look at it, if you take the correct precautions, you have almost minimized human contact. You print out your passes, you go into a sanitized area, you don't need to queue with a lot of concentration of people around, you don't get served food, you have social distancing at the airport, and you disinfect an aircraft and you try and observe protocols which are established.
You have reduced seating capacity as well, right?
Yeah. Now, we were under pressure. People took us to court, including one of our pilots. Air India pilot went to the Mumbai High Court and said the central seat should be kept vacant. I personally looked at all the evidence that there was around in the world, whether other airlines were doing it. I looked at what the literature on the subject was, and we came to the conclusion that keeping the middle seat vacant. Let me give you an example. In an economy class configuration where in this area there are 3 seats, even if you keep the middle seat vacant, you frankly don't have the social distance. So the solution must lie elsewhere, and the solution came how? You've got a ventilating system which is top-down air, it's recirculating fresh air, plus you test the passenger. First of all, you know who the passenger is. You have contact tracing. If the passenger is seating 24E and God forbid he develops symptoms after that, you know who the passengers around him or her were, you can trace it back. So we had this dilemma, but I can tell you the matter was raised in the Mumbai High Court. The court considered it. I decided as the minister that we were not going to go by our knowledge or reading of the literature available. We would establish a committee of the professionals of the best qualification. So we got 3 very eminent people on that committee. The committee was headed by the Secretary Civil Aviation. It had Professor Balram Bhargav, who is the head of ICMR. It had Professor Guleria, who is the head of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And it had the famous Dr. Naresh Trehan, who heads Medanta Hospital. And they made recommendations, we followed those recommendations. And I can tell you, we are flying now with the middle seat occupied. We've got the court order, but there will be a hearing subsequently when we come along it. But this is the conventional wisdom. What would have happened if we had been asked to keep the middle seat vacant? My submission to you is that if you've got 3 seats and you keep 1 vacant, all right, you immediately have to compensate. Because, air carriers typically operate on business models which have very low profit. Because it's capital intensive, the cost of aviation turbine fuel is very high. So cost of ticket would have gone up if 1 seat had to be kept vacant out of 3. But it's not a question of us asking, there has to be demand. But more than that, in a federal structure, the central government can prescribe a guideline. It would say that, all right, for visitors coming in, passengers coming in from foreign countries, you should have 1 week compulsory mandatory quarantine and 1 week you can self-monitor. That central government can prescribe. And for domestic travel, you can self-monitor and self-quarantine at home. But state governments have to fight the virus at their level. The district magistrate has to fight the virus. The chief minister has to. They can do their own. So we had a little bit of adjustment. But I'm very happy to tell you, we opened domestic traffic on the 25th of May. not even a month. We said initially it should be 33%. I wanted to start with 33 and slowly, raise it to 40, 45, which we will be doing. And today I can tell you that it is all the airports. First of all, I made an announcement around the 15th that we were ready. By we were ready means the airports were ready, the air carriers were ready, the ecosystem was ready. Today, with less than not even a month, we have 10 days to go in the month. We've done what, 22 days or so, I think, of this. We're doing an average 70,000 passengers a day. 70,000 passengers a day is, I'm saying this is the higher figure. We started with 30, went up, sometimes it's 65, 68, 70, sometimes a little lower.
What's it in normal times?
Normal time would be 300,000, approximately. When I said 33%, I was hoping to get 100,000 a day. But Mumbai was more or less, well, not closed. They were willing to take in 25 flights incoming, 25 flights outgoing. And I think from tomorrow they've doubled it. They'll take 50 in, 50 out. Some of the other states, Bangalore, Karnataka, I hope will take more. Others will take more. But each state must have its own comfort level. And we can't be seen to be, pushing them. We use a system of, talking to them, dialoguing with them, a system of gentle persuasion. Because civil aviation and connectivity are important. I mean, it's a small percentage of rail, but it's an important percentage. And my overall objective is that we want to keep fares at a way that slowly, as we grow economically, there is a shift in terms of consumer preference from traveling by rail to traveling by air. That's why we've kept the band of the price band also. If the first class airfare, air-conditioned fare between Delhi and Mumbai, I don't know, it's hypothetically, I think 3,500 rupees or 4,500 rupees. 4,500. And the second class AC is 3,000. We've kept the minimum fare at 3,500. So because your idea is to get more capacity, more efficiency, then you are able to grow. So my first challenge out of your three is to get domestic civil aviation back to 50% of the 55%. My own expectation is that by the 22nd, 23rd of the month, we will reach the 30% figure and when we'll start opening up. Will we get it by the end of the month? What I'm looking for? Will we take a little longer? It doesn't really matter. As long as we are able to do it with all the co-stakeholders being comfortable with it. I mean, I don't want a situation where somebody turns around and says, look, I have to close up now. Now, Chennai is going to observe a lockdown. They've taken a decision, but I hope civil aviation can continue. I mean, they have it in certain places, but the planes will continue and they will take, the measures required for the passengers. Mumbai is increasing. Others are hopefully going to be increasing. The second issue we come is, we're a country with 1.35 billion population within the country, but we have also a large overseas population. We have people who have been resident abroad for many years. Many of them are Indian nationals. They are working outside. They are, many of them have very strong economic and emotional links with the country. We had to, before we did domestic civil aviation, we did Vande Bharat. And Vande Bharat is doing extremely well. In the 3 phases together, we brought back about 97,000 people. And those operations are continuing as we speak. Why did I do domestic civil aviation first and Vande Bharat second? Because I'm hoping that Vande Bharat will dovetail into normal international civil aviation. I started with the Lifeline Udan, then I came to domestic. Then I'm talking, Vande Bharat actually started earlier. Vande Bharat started on 6th May. When we finish phase 3, which I think will be end June, beginning July, we will have to take a decision whether we expand Vande Bharat on the existing terms and conditions or we dovetail it into normal flights. But it's not our decision. This is something where it takes 2 to tango. I mean, the other country must be ready also. Now, every country in the world today is imposing some form of conditionality on people coming in. We also, for instance, we are not allowing everybody to come in. We are allowing our nationals who are stranded outside. We are allowing overseas citizen of India OCI card holders to come back. Okay, if one of their parents was a national, etc., with some condition. We are allowing foreign diplomats to come in, UN officials to come in. We are allowing some businessmen, very select category to come. But it's not open. It's not as if we have now anybody who wants to fly to India, just whether he or she has an existing visa or wants to apply for a visa. It is restricted. Now, if all countries in the world have these restrictions, you cannot by definition afford a situation in which you open normal civil aviation. So when I looked at an IATA produced list, I found name of the country, entry point, unconditional or conditional. Well, in some it is prohibited. I mean, they didn't let anybody come in. Okay? In most it is conditional. Now, airlines will not be able to work their normal summer schedules or their next schedule unless there is openness on that. So, by definition, in the absence of countries opening up, and we don't know when they will open up, I keep saying this depends on a number of factors, including the predictability of the virus. I mean, normal traditional behavioral patterns are that, you get these peaks, you get them, then, the curve starts coming under control, flattening and downward. If that is the case, then, and you don't have these second peaks, etc. Now, I saw a report this morning, Beijing has many cases now. I mean, Beijing was initially completely insulated from the epicenter of the virus, which was in Wuhan, but Beijing is getting cases now. Yeah. So, you have to factor these things in. So, if you make allowance for the fact that the predictability of the virus will be as per normal expectation, and your stakeholders, that is your counterpart, civil aviation authorities are ready, then you can start in a month from now, you can start thinking in terms of, putting the nuts and bolts together, and whether you open up in bubbles between two places or, some of these decisions have been political. I mean, I think in the United States of America, they at one stage stopped flights from China, they stopped flights from Europe. And once you can sit down with them, work it out, I think you are now looking at the next stage. Domestic civil aviation has to go up. Another reason domestic civil aviation has to reach a point of maturity, about 50 or 55%, is because international flights typically take place between the bigger metropolitan centers and this thing. I mean, if you were to fly to the United States, Air India will fly to, or Delta will fly to JFK or to Newark. But then, if you have a connecting flight to another couple of hours elsewhere, but if domestic civil aviation not working, and if quarantines are on, you have to fly, let's say, from New York to New York, somewhere in India, but you will be quarantined for 7 days in Delhi. So it doesn't work. So the cost structures of normal civil aviation and this kind of a control system are very different. Now when we fly our planes, they have to be on the ground there for 40 hours. Okay? Also, many of our flights today on long haul routes are subsidizing the flights which we are carrying out to countries in India's proximity. For instance, Air India is selling, if memory serves me right, a ticket to the Gulf, one-way ticket at 13,000 or thereabouts. Whereas our private carriers who are carrying out charter operation, they are charging nearly twice the amount or nearly that amount, because they look at their own viability. So I think the good news is that we've got the civil aviation scene restarted. We are very cautious, and I don't want to jump the queue. We are confident that we can take the 70,000 passengers that we have on to 100,000 and then on to 150,000, where it will become 50-55%. And once we've got all our stakeholders, our airports, our state governments used to the idea and wanting to expand, then we come to the next stage, which is international flights. Meanwhile, the demand that there is from the Middle East, from places in Southeast Asia like Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, the Gulf in particular, we will try and meet that demand within the existing framework of operations.
According to the data I have, your Vande Bharat mission, I think, has got back 80,000 people.
97,000.
97,000 till date. So, what was the experience? I mean, how was
No,
the
no,
team,
it's a very
teamwork?
interesting.
And I
Let's
hear
start.
there were women pilots as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, we started on numbers. We asked MEA. MEA, based on the number of people who have registered with them, they thought the whole operation would be what, 190,000 people, they thought. Today, Vande Bharat has already brought back 97 and is going up at 4,000 or 5,000 every day. But more than that, there are other carriers, our private carriers to a small extent, but foreign carriers who have brought back another 100,000. So that 190,000 numbers has been exceeded. You know, I was told, why are you looking at this 190,000 in one place alone in the Gulf? There are more than that amount of people registered to come back. So, you know, when you start an operation, your definition is people in distress, people who are stranded. And you think only those who really need to travel, you know, for whom travel is absolutely essential, that they will come. But, you know, as economic opportunity stops being available, there are large scale, you know, large numbers of people being rendered unemployed. There are people who have other problems. The numbers are increasing. Now, you could perhaps say, why don't you suddenly put another, you've got the aircraft, we've got 500-600 aircraft, we have no problem. We can just put them and you know, on assignment and bring them all back. No, it's not that easy. The state which is receiving them must be ready. So it's not just an airline willing to fly the passenger, the receiving state. And some of the states have had difficulties. They would like, because they also want to be able to manage it, because people who come in have to be on 1 week mandatory quarantine, some of them. Some of them need other facilities. So I think it's a process. I think we've done much better than I anticipated when we started off. Remember that in the first week, from 6th May onwards, in phase 1, I think the phase 1 was longer than the first week, we brought back only 12,800 people from 12 countries in 64 flights. Today the number is 97,000 if you take all the things together. I think we've done, touch wood, we've got off to a very good start on Vande Bharat. But if you look at the overall numbers, there are people who are in India who are not Indians, they were foreign nationals. They have been evacuated by their own country's carriers, some of the world's leading airlines. They've taken out 100,000 people. Foreign carriers plus little help from our private carriers, they've also brought another 100,000. So 100,000 people have flown out, 27,000 by us, additions of 130,000. The Vande Bharat of Air India has brought back 97, let's say 100. Others have brought back 100, it's 200. But now we are putting on more flights. So you will see the figure of 100,000 being brought back by Vande Bharat suddenly will look like a higher number, and the private carriers carrying out charter operations to bring people back will also look higher. And they'll also be taking people out.
I'm told the people who are coming back, the migrant workers, you're also doing skill mapping of them.
Yes.
Is that true, and how does it help?
When we said that people were expected back in large numbers, we wanted to ensure that we were able to do what you call skill mapping. We wanted to produce a system whereby it's not left to somebody filling a form and then, you know, not being able to do it. So I'm very happy that we've been able to start this process. I would have been happier if we had started it immediately when Vande Bharat, but it took a few days. Now we have a pretty good idea, a database of people coming back. Like I have from which are the top 10 countries from which people have come back. Okay, I can give you the names. Which are the top 10 states where they've come to in terms of percentage. But more than that, what are the work sectors in which their skills have been digitally mapped? I'll give you food processing, 2.86%. Aviation and aerospace, 3.12%. Now, this aviation and aerospace may be general. When you go into it deeper, you'll find out Banking, financial services and insurance 3.25%. Logistics 3.31%. Management, entrepreneurship and professional 4.08%. IT, ITES 4.21, automotive 4.51, tourism and hospitality 8.74, oil and gas 14.03, construction 14.89. What are the levels at which those people have come? Supervisor, site, nurse, human resources executives, welder, we've got it.
Sir, a couple of quick questions. One is, in this whole crisis, aviation industry is taking a huge hit. Now, there is ATF costs, there is taxes, then there are development fee, airport taxes, etc., etc. Is the government thinking of some kind of
No, the government is not thinking. Government is in the process of doing it. You see, there is a
France has given a 17 billion.
India is not France. India is not France, and India is not the United States. Look, you cut the cloth according to what is available. Yeah. If you were the government, and if you put yourself in the position of the decision maker, when you've got crises across migrant workers, this, that, and the other, you have to decide where airlines will come in. Because there is a point of view that you need to make the airline viable, and you need to do. So, we have a number of steps we've done, number of steps we've taken. The airlines recognize it. But I suspect that the kind of package like $5 billion, which let's say Hong Kong has given, so and so, that is not something that the Indian state could do or perhaps would want to do. But it can do it in different ways. Aviation turbine fuel, I agree. We need to rationalize that. And we are already in discussion. I've written several letters to everyone. GST on that, it's something that the GST Council is to do. We are ready with that. But we've taken a large number of other measures. Rationalization of airspace. Once we get that, it is potentially, the windfall from that could be thousands of crores, number one. Number two, there are several other things which we have quietly been doing, but it's part of an ongoing process. The most important thing is you need to get economic activity revived. And you need to be able to get the aviation sector back in business. And back in business in a way, not suddenly open up 100%. You'll get a backlash. So it's like, you test the waters, you put your foot into the water, see how hot it is, and you start growing and you start expanding it. Airlines the world over were in difficulty prior to COVID, and I think COVID is going to make it much worse. I don't want to go into individual airlines. I can see very large number of airlines either ceasing operations or cutting their operation by 50%, not wanting to. So there will be opportunities. There will be airlines which are offering to make their wide-bodied aircraft available. There will be some churning and rationalization within our domestic civil aviation industry. I see some people being able to take advantage of that. But my bottom line, and this is not just a gut feeling, no matter which way I look at the sum, we will come out of this stronger.
Is the Air India sale still on the table or off the
table? Very much. It's not a question of a sale. You have to ensure that Air India as an airline survives. That's the first thing. In order for it to survive, it has to be privatized. Look, there is no way any government anywhere in the world can run an airline based on the kind of numbers of cash infusion which has been going on. I have been a Minister for Civil Aviation for 1 year now. Earlier I had my other portfolio, which I still have. But the issue is, even I have a certain reluctance to go to the Finance Minister. And if you talk to economists, they'll say, well, rationalize. Where Air India can cut costs, you cut cost. Help them. There are some leases which are not viable for them. But there are the kind of assets that Air India has, a private operator may be able to run it much better. So what is our commitment? Our commitment is to saving the airline. Our commitment is to ensure that its staff are profitably employed. Okay, but we can't do it on the basis of keeping a large reservoir of force of people who've retired and who should have gone many, or we've got other supernumerary posts, or we have wage structures which are not rational. Wage structures must conform to current market rates. So I think the airline industry overall is going to go through that. But if your question is, are we committed to this process for Air India? My answer is yes. But it's a process.
By this year?
Oh, yes, absolutely. As I mentioned to you, I don't think the government has the wherewithal to sustain this for a longer. The sooner we rationalize this, the SM was in a fairly advanced stage of work when the coronavirus hit us. So,
thank you. With this, we come to the end of this very special interview. We see that directionally, India's civil aviation is opening up. We are doing it cautiously, slowly, but the minister assures us that it is, we are making an opportunity out of this terrible crisis. We will see changes which will be permanent, and a lot of things are happening in terms of mapping of migrant workers who are coming back, in terms of making it easy for the airlines, and also the sale of Air India is very much on the table. It's not off the table. Thank you.